thanks very much for joining us. We have Brian Garish, who is the president of Banfield Pet Hospitals. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
And we are here at the National Field Leadership Program here in Atlanta, where you have how many leaders here?
We have about 700 people here today.
And these are all the leaders in your organization, right?
Yes.
And you kicked off this morning talking about culture being the one thing that keeps you up at night.
Yes.
And the one thing that I thought was really interesting, and we talked about this beforehand too, you are really active on Instagram in particular.
Yes.
And you're clearly over the age of 30. So talk to me.
Fortunately, I am.
So talk to me about how that fits into your vision of what leadership looks like at Banfield.
Yeah, so I think culture has been my top priority. And it's really because I think back to leaders that I've been inspired by and what they meant to me. And some of the best leaders I've ever worked for were very inspirational. They showed an interest in me, but they listened to me, they connected to me, and in doing so they made me feel really important. And I'll never forget how they made me feel, and that was always a trait I wanted to be as a leader, is always being available for anyone, answering any questions, and listening and learning from them to really make a better world for them. And as I increased different roles in leadership, it became harder and harder as you get further away from the client. And so I was always trying to figure out how else can I connect with them. And I wish I had this tool of social media 20 years ago, because that would have been even more effective. But it's the quickest and easiest way to really be connected to your people, to understand what's happening in their lives, but more importantly, what do they need to make their jobs even better.
Now what's interesting is it seems like you've really accelerated your use of this tool
Yes.
over the past year or so.
Yes.
What was the shift? Was there a pivotal moment? Was there a come to realization that this is really powerful?
Yes,
What was that? Tell me the story about that.
So when we visit hospitals, we changed how we would visit. It went away from the traditional hierarchical approach where the senior-most person does the talking or the senior-most person does the leading of the visit. So when I joined Banfield, we changed that all up. We did a huddle. We started our visit with a huddle where every associate had an opportunity to speak. Every associate understood why we were there, so we declared, here's why we're visiting, here's how we want to help, but then we just asked some powerful questions. What's working? And if you could change anything, what would you change? And I was just really impressed with how much passion all the associates had, but they had great ideas because they were closest to the work. They were the ones doing the work. They were the ones closest to the client. They knew what worked and what didn't work. So after every market visit, I was always inspired by our associates' willingness to have their voice heard. But then when I went back to the office, I wouldn't hear from anyone. And so I started questioning, well, why is that? Well, maybe once a month I'd get an email, but we then thought, well, how are people communicating? So when I go back out on market visits, I started to ask questions about, well, how are you communicating and where are you active? And it just kept coming back to Instagram, Instagram, Instagram. And I thought, would there be a way to truly show up in a transparent way, in an authentic way, where they could see that I was so passionate about getting their voice, and could I hear from them differently? So we tested something. One was creating an Instagram account. So I did that, and associates started to follow. It was kind of small at first, but I didn't get really a lot of questions. I may have got a lot of likes on pictures, but I really wasn't engaging with them. But then we tried something differently, something we called Banter with Brian, and we used the Instagram story to fully connect with them. Once we did this and sent a direct message to our associates, I had over 350 questions the first time, and the second time we did it, I had over 500 questions. And I made it my priority to answer every single question.
Every single one of those.
Every single question I answered. It took me 5 days, by the way, but I dedicated that time, and it was the best time I could have spent because almost every single person responded with, I cannot believe you responded, thank you so very much, and you could see, I could just see the impact through their words. And since then, we haven't changed anything else. I get about 2 to 3 questions a day from our associates every single day since then.
I saw some of those questions. These are not easy questions.
No, they're not easy questions. There are questions about our strategy. There are questions about some real life examples of pain points and frustrations that they have. But I actually love those questions because when we take those questions and post them, and some of these questions we'll actually post publicly in our through our intranet for every associate to see. We've actually done some FAQs based on a number of the questions. We'll create themes and really educate everybody. But what I love about the tough questions is it shows that we're here and willing to answer anything and everything. And those are some of the best responses we get. Even when it's a no, at least they understand why we're doing it. And what's so great about it is it creates that trust that, good, they are listening and they are approachable and they'll answer any question.
I have one last question. The space, I mean, all businesses are under a lot of pressure, change, disruption. What's the biggest disruption that you're facing in your business, and where do you see yourself being 5 years on the other side of that disruption?
Yes. So we're trying to create a future roadmap and strategy, but that's pretty typical to any business. Every business leader I've been able to fortunately talk to always talks about strategy and the future, and while that is a priority, culture is my number one priority. And why I come back to culture is I think the biggest disruption are the next generations in the workforce. Generation Z will represent 40% of the U.S. population in 2020. This is a generation that's starting to graduate college, and they view businesses differently. Their styles are completely differently. And I think too often what's happened in the past is the business has defined the individual. These new generations are going to define how business ought to be. And I think individuals are the new disruption point. They're the ones that are going to vote with staying for companies. They're going to be the ones that vote for brands, and they're going to determine who's relevant and not relevant. And it's up to us to understand those generations and prepare for those now.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for your time.
Yes, no, thank you very much.
All right.